right? The Master explained here, he says, let's see. All right, he said they have a double resonant frequency, right? All right, if you go to verse 7.
What page is that?
That's page 2, but it's verse 7. Inside of Patarak, our tones, wavelength A. All right? It says, know that frequencies are only resonant when the one wavelength is an exact multiple of the other of the same key. Who in here knows what resonance is? So, okay, all right, so let's make sure we explain that or expound on that. Resonance, you're dealing with tones. You're dealing with frequencies, all right? Tones, sounds, vibrational frequencies, that's DNA. It's all of that's being affected by that. It's energy, and it's the rate at which it's vibrating. Resonance means resound, right? You can take a tuning fork. Let's say you have a group of tuning forks, an octave of tuning forks. Say you have an A tuning fork here. That's my little tuning fork. And you got all these other little tuning forks, right? And then you have another A here, but it's on the next octave, right? Let me make this more efficient. Because we know that the octave is, it's the 8th one up, right? So you got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then A again, right? What happens is you can hit this particular tuning fork A, let's say it's at a frequency of 220 hertz, right? If it's vibrating at 220 hertz, the next octave up is twice that. It's an exact multiple of it at 440 hertz, right? Now, it's called sympathetic resonance, that what happens is this A at 220 will not affect this B, C, D, E, F, or G. But what will happen is after you've rung this and it's activated the particles of air around it to 220 hertz, right? And then you muffle the sound out, you'll still hear the ringing down here on this particular A at 440 hertz because of the fact that it's got what's called sympathetic resonance, right? So it's an exact multiple of it. So therefore they are connected by their frequencies, right? They are an exact multiple of each other. Now, when we're dealing with our tones, the males resonate within the bass clef. Females resonate within the treble clef, right? So, when you're talking about having a double resonance with a being who is physically male but can be spiritually female, that means he has the ability to operate within, if we're just talking about musically speaking, because Pleiadean explained we all need to learn music. He said if we learn music, it'll help us to be able to better understand where we're going as far as doctrine. If he has a double resonance, just musically speaking, that means this being can operate within the bass clef as well as the treble clef, right? So he explained that these beings are more sensitive to certain things and they can see more colors on a light spectrum than an average person who doesn't have that double frequency. So he said that's why when you see within the gay community or within the fashion community, should I say, or the music community, he said that it's normally gays at the top of it that set the trends. Don't believe me, go and check that out. Because they see colors differently than how you see colors if you're not resonating on both of those places, right? But the purpose of them was for us to be able to, they were sensitive to be able to know where to be at certain times so that we would be able to open up gateways to be able to make it back where we're supposed to be. That's what these depictions actually show up here as well, where you have gatekeepers that come together to be able to open up a stargate or a Pt.2, the stargate. So they have purpose. But you also have beings who aren't using sex for the purpose of procreation, but rather they're using it for recreation, right? And you or me or anybody else knows we've gone through that aspect of sex too because we operate with it incorrectly. But we would like to justify our incorrect usage of sex, but allow, or turn around and point the finger at somebody else and say, well, you're just doing it to feel good but you're doing it with another man, or she's doing it with another female, and then that makes it wrong for them. So really, it's religious for us to start pointing the finger based on somebody's sexuality. Go with the second part of the question.
Okay, before I go on with that, does that have anything to do with what you were just saying about the religious aspect, how some people may be male with a female spirit or a female with a male spirit? Can you expound on that? Because I think that might have something to do with it. I don't know.
Say that again?
Now, some people, they say they're gay. He might be gay with feminine ways, maybe that he has a female spirit in him. I think the master talked about that, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. That's what the double portion part is, where they're actually female inside, male outside.
And vice versa.
And vice versa.
Okay, gotcha.
And that also had to do with having the beings that came here from Sirius, the beings that came here from Orion, having come here together, because you had the beings from Sirius come, and when they came, and then the beings from Orion came, they made a group of beings that came from out of themselves, but they were hermaphroditic, and they couldn't actually procreate with them with each other.
Okay, here's the second part of the question.
Go ahead.
It said, if all of your different ET races bred with humans, would it explain these degenerate behaviors of human beings? I guess he's talking about the homosexuals again, because this is the same question.
Degenerate homosexuality wouldn't necessarily be looked at as being degenerate from the Wu-nwaup standpoint of view, unless, as the master teacher said, you have beings who have, there's a such thing that we call, which is hormone sexual. And you have beings who, because they're just nymphomaniacs, they'll have sex with a tree, they'll have sex with anything. I mean, literally, let's look at it. Seriously, you have beings right now, they have sex with plastic, they have sex with anything. You got people having sex with dogs, you know what I'm saying? And that's something that they've been doing anyway. But because they're related. But anyway, and I don't mean that to be funny or whatever, but no, they're literally doing these things and they're having sex with anything. You know what I'm saying? And it's funny that people will say there's nothing wrong with them having sex with anything, but if they have sex with somebody of their same sex, then now all of a sudden there's a problem. It's funny how that works. That's the whole porne. That's their sex force. They operate by lust.
Because wouldn't that be the same as having sex with like toys? People got sex toys like dildos.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm talking about. You decided to go ahead and take it there. But see, when we start saying degenerate behavior, let's go ahead and get into that. If you're talking about degenerate behavior as far as like beings being extra aggressive, being really warlike, killing for fun and things of that nature, you're talking about what's in their genes. Degenerate. You're talking about what's in their genes from their ancestors, which is what they did. You have beings who totally, put it like this. Pt.2 wrote a book a long time ago called The Dog, right? He asked a question. He said, what happens if you have a pet goldfish, right, and you don't feed that goldfish? What happens?
It dies.
It'll starve to death, right? He said, what happens if you have a cat, right, and you don't feed it? He said, first it's going to try to run away. And he said, if it can't get away, then it's going to starve to death, right? He said, if you have a dog and then you don't feed it, what will happen?
It'll turn on you.
It will turn on you and then eat you. Why? That's what's in his nature. Because that's who he is. It doesn't matter if it's a little chihuahua or whatever else. The genetic, it comes from Canis familiaris. All of these beings come from dogs and jackals, period. So that's what he is. It doesn't matter how small they made him or how large they made him. They still come from dogs and jackals. So genetically, his nature is still that. And there's a serious point to this. I grew up raising dogs, right? And we all know, those of us that have had dogs, if you want to make a dog aggressive, what you do?
Mistreated.
You can mistreat them too, but what else you do? As far as feeding.
Some people put, I think, gunpowder.
Some people do that, but what they put it with?
With dog food.
They put it with red meat, with raw flesh.
Right.
And that triggers something in their DNA for them to be more aggressive. If you ever seen it, you literally see now he's got a taste for blood because that's what's in his genetics, right? So then when we start talking about why is it that when you're talking about the Caucasoid race, they love their food to be raw.
Raw, medium rare.
You see what I'm saying? It's something in their nature. So now if you're talking about degenerate behavior in that sense, I would consider that to be degenerate. But then at the same time, we could just say it's not degenerate, it's just their genetics. You know what I mean? If you put it like that. And that's what the master teacher started to teach us when we start going into the inclination affirmation classes, which started back in April of, go to Wu-nuwaupu.com, look for a class called Inclination with the sexuality, the tatat, and atuntat, maritat. And also it continues with our brother Mursal Imhatep, or Imsatak. No, Imhatep took it too. But yeah, it goes into explaining that inclination deals with the nature and the voices that they hear within their genetics. And that's really when you see certain physical attributes, now you can be able to understand their nature better and you'll know why he does the things that he does. Like why he loves to go and kill for fun, go and put a head up in his house, and then you think that's something to be justified. That's degenerate nature in our sense because our ancestors didn't operate in that manner. So really we just get off of the whole homosexual thing or our judgment on somebody's sexual preference, because look how many people is dying over nothing. And I guess that'll be all on that question. If you have any more questions, please make sure that you continue to put your questions on YouTube. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm talking to the camera here.
Okay.
I'm trying to get used to that.
Yeah, I got you. Now, when you say they're related to dogs, can you elaborate on that?
Yes,
what do you
I
mean
can.
by that?
All right. This is your first time in class, brother. First off, I want to, let you know, we're here always. So anytime that you have any questions, we'll be right here. Okay. Question and answer classes every Friday, 7:30. We have things that go on throughout the week. So, let me ask you this first. What background are you coming from? Are you coming from a religious background like most of us?
Christianity.
Christianity. Okay. Inside of Christianity, you get into inside of the book of Genesis, right? You get to a point where it explains that you had the sons of God come in unto the daughters of man. And when they did that, they actually created a new group of beings that they called giants, right? These fallen beings were known as Nephilim, or as we say in our language, Nephalim, right? And then the offspring that came from them were known as Gibborim, right? And it says that they were wicked, and everything that they imagined to do was wickedness continually, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this tells us first and foremost that if you had these beings that were considered to be sons of God, right, and they came down to this planet and they physically had sex or raped these beings which were on this planet, that lets you know that these beings were physical, they had genetics, and they had to have had 46 chromosomes just like the beings that they raped in order for them to be able to have an offspring in the first place. Okay? Mm-hmm. So the first thing that we do is we go into understanding when we've been taught about these angelic beings and things of that nature throughout Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. What we're really talking about is encounters with beings from outside of this planet, which by virtue of that definition would make them extraterrestrial. Are you following me?
Yeah.
All right. Pt.2 has explained to us, and don't believe us, check it out. When you go into seeing the origin of the Bible, right, and the Quran, you'll find that if you look back into Sumeria or earlier Mesopotamia, right, you'll start seeing that those stories actually come from Sumerian accounts. Now, when you were dealing with the Sumerian accounts, you had a being by the name of Ninti, or Ninhursag. What she did was she had, within a laboratory, they were creating a new species of beings to do work for them here on this planet, right? They utilize a group of beings from another star constellation called Pleiades, and you can find that inside of Job 9:9, where you see these different constellations being named, right? With Pleiades, or these beings called Pleiadians, their attributes physically are that they're albino beings. In our language, we call them kamahu, but they're albino type beings. So these beings utilize these Pleiadians, right? And in using them, they utilize them along with other creatures on this planet to be able to get certain natures to create a workforce for themselves. So then when you start saying their connection in that sense, right, we're talking about a genetic connection that comes from their origin, which you'll find the stories of within the stories like your Atrahasis and what's called the Enuma Elish. So these are Sumerian tablets that tell of the origin of this made man, or this beast man. Why do we call him beast man? Beast man, not because of a sense of saying beast like, rah, we scared of this beast, is a monster, what have you. We're saying beast because when we look at ourselves as being descendants of Africa, we all have what we call non-ether woolly hair. But when you look at these other beings, these Caucasoids, right, what they have is not hair, but rather they have fur like every other beast on this planet, which shows you again a genetic attribute which connects them genetically to other animals on this planet. Africans do not have that. You understand? Mm-hmm. So it's basically showing that they are indeed genetically connected. But don't believe me, ask them when you go and find their story of Romulus and Remus over in Italy. When you find their story where they're saying that they indeed trace themselves back to being nurtured by a she-wolf or a jackal. And they've got a big statue of it where it's two twins, Romulus and Remus, and they're suckling off the teats of a jackal dog. So they connect to that, and that's why they always say that's man's best friend. It's their best friend. You understand? And also going back to their times being in the Caucasus Mountains with their leprous state, they also had the dogs licking their wounds and things of that nature too. So it really goes back to them being connected genetically to them as well as other things. You follow?
Yeah.
Next question?
Yeah. Okay, so what's the difference between this Christianity and Islam?
Between what Christianity and Islam?
Wu-nwaup.
Okay. Wu-nwaup is not our religion. Wu-nwaup is our way of life which predates and existed before there was ever such thing as your Christianities, your Judaism, and your Islam. Once again, taking it back. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam find their roots from out of Zoroastrianism and the Hinduism, which comes out of those beings that came down into Mesopotamia. These beings is what you find if you just do a little research. They call themselves Anunnaki. Inside of Genesis 1:1, when it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, right? The word God, if you look up the Hebrew Strong's number for that, is, can I erase this up on the board? Can I erase this up on the board? Y'all good?
Yeah.
All right. When you go to Genesis 1:1 and you see that word God, it's not that three-letter word that makes you feel like you're talking about one person.
Theos?
No, it's not Theos because Theos is Greek. That doesn't happen until you get into the New Testament.
Okay.
We're still in the Old Testament in Genesis 1:1. Genesis 1:1, the word that you see as God, which makes you think immediately, okay, this is talking about it's one person, right? It says Elohim. Exactly. Elohim or Elohim, right? And so when you transliterate from their language of Hebrew or Aramaic, the yod and the meme, which makes it sound yim or im, is actually pluralizing this thing. So really, it shouldn't say God to begin with, but rather it should say these beings or this group of beings. And so since you have this coming from the Sumerian tablets, in Sumerian tablets it explains about a group of beings known by the phrase Anunnaki. And these beings came here with a purpose to do things. So when you see these beings as Elohim, the Elohim are actually these Anunnaki or these Anakim who came to this planet for a purpose. And one of the purposes that ended up coming out with their creation with these Adamites or these Muadamu, as we say in our language, was to create that workforce for them to be slaves, right? Like whenever somebody accepts Islam, they call themselves Abd, which means servant or slave. When you go inside of the book of Leviticus, don't believe me, check it out. Go and read the book of Leviticus, and all throughout the book of Leviticus, all you see is that this particular being or these beings as God, it keep telling them how to prepare food and put it up on the grill for them the entire way. You follow? So it's telling you a story that has been changed from what it originally was. You follow? So you'd have to go back into the Sumerian, and our master teacher has walked us through that. So the difference when you're talking about Wu-nwaup is right knowledge, it's right wisdom, it's right understanding, which leads us to sound right reasoning. But this is who we are by nature. This is our way of life. This is not some religion to be converted to. These are the facts about who and what you are, not what you've accepted. We had to accept Christianity. We had to go outside of ourselves and accept Christianity. We had to go outside of ourselves and accept Judaism. We had to go outside of ourselves and accept Islam. But when you look in the mirror and you see yourself, and then you look on the walls in Africa and you see yourself, you know that you're connected to them because by genetics, you know that you were there. So then when you begin to ask the question, how did we operate when we did all of those things that we consider to be great and all others on the planet consider to be great? Because they spend millions upon billions of dollars trying to figure us out, right? That's when you begin to see this is who we were, this is who we still are. So this is your way of life having been brought back to you by that one who's incarnated in this day and time to reform and bring your story back to you after you've gone through this period of faith and belief, which is ignorance. We've been operating by faith and belief. They're always asking you to believe in this being that you never even have any proof of existence, right? But if you touch yourself, you already know you exist. And if you exist, that means all the beings that came before you had to have existed as well. And they have to exist because you still exist. You follow? Mm-hmm. So that becomes the difference. It's our way of life. We deal with the facts. And we deal with who we are, not what we've accepted. And the master teacher has walked us through the different schools of religion so that we would be able to, walk away having moved all of the fallacies out of it so that we could take ourselves out of religion altogether. You follow? Mm-hmm. So that's where we are at this point. We are the people that we've always been, not under religion in that sense. You follow? But if you do want to use a phrase of religion, then the one phrase that we use is animism, which is the closest thing they use, which is saying we understand that there is spiritual energy within everything. You understand? And that's just a part of our way, a part of our natural way. You follow? So that will be the difference. And you're responsible for what you do. You follow? Rather than you saying, okay, if it's bad and it happened to me, oh, that was the devil. If it's good and it happened for me, I passed my test, and thank God I passed my test. But I study. But I give somebody outside of myself credit for it. You see what I'm saying? So that's the difference. You become responsible rather than saying, okay, there's a God that'll put me in heaven and a devil that'll make me go to hell. No, you're responsible. You're the center of your own universe. You follow?
Yeah.
All right? And with that, I'm going to pass the class over to my good brother, Ma'at Akheratum Reyes. All right.
Well, maybe it's a comment, not really a question, but I just want you to expound. I mean, if just seeing other young Nubians come to the class, it'd be hard for me if I didn't go through the different schools of Ansarullah and Judaism and things like that. I don't think I could ever grasp this information now if I just walk through the doors. What do you say to the people out here who are, and I know Pops have expounded on it, this is their time actually. I mean, we going through the schools, and you've been a study of the master teacher for a long time as well. It'd be hard for me to come through the doors as me being 43, as opposed to the young people who are just coming through the doors and getting it now. And if I didn't go through the different schools, I'd be like, oh man, these niggas is crazy. I would never grasp this.
Right, right.
What do you say about that?
Okay. Make sure you edit that. But first of all, to those who are new, understand where the brother's coming from when he said the schools of Ansarullah, Nubian Islamic Hebrew, and so forth. First, let's establish what our master teacher has done for the last 50 years. This means before I was born. Since the year 1963 to the year 1969 to the year 1970, down to 83, 93, and on, he's walked us through various schools of thought. And we call it schools of thought because each of your monotheistic religions, or that which our people are attracted to, is a state of a mind state. Islam is a mind state. Christianity is a mind state. Judaism is a mind state. And we all were caught up in that because that is the only thing that was made available to us since the 400 years of being brought here by the slave masters. I say masters because there was an Islamic slave trade also prior to the 400-year slave trade that was brought here. You know what I'm saying? And those African Muslim converts are the ones who sold most of us into slavery. But moving forward, our master teacher came in 1963 with Wu-nwaup, which is our spiritual science, with Wu-nwaupu, which is right knowledge, right wisdom, right understanding that would lead into sound right reasoning. The fact is, we were in a state that we were not prepared for that because all we knew was religion. All our people knew was Christianity. You know what I'm saying? Islam was being introduced in the 60s to try to deviate the cultural aspect of the cultural explosion in the 60s. And it has worked because a lot of people gravitated towards that. Right? So our master teacher, because we wasn't prepared for what he came to give us in the 1960s, he had to give us the first school, which was the youngest of the three religions, which was Islam. And that was under the Nubian Islamic Hebrew. Nubian, which ties into our culture, Islamic, which was a religious state of mind, and Hebrews. And if you do any research and investigation, you'll realize that all these scriptures are linked, meaning that they have a lineage. And that lineage tied to one man named Father Abraham, who was from where? Chaldea, Ur Chaldea, which is Shinar, Mesopotamia, that region, era. This is why they say all the religion came from the east. Yes, from the far east. You know what I'm saying? That's where it came from. But as Africans, we exercise a particular culture. So, moving along to your question, in the 1970s, he came with the Ansarullah, which was the teaching of the religious school of Islam. When we graduated out of that, meaning what qualifies to graduate out of a particular school is our level of questioning. You know what I'm saying? It's just like when you're in school, right? You're in first grade, and you have a mental capacity of a first grader. What qualifies you to go to the second grade?
To ask second grade question or beyond.
Exactly. You start to go beyond that first grade, and you start to go into a second grade mindset as far as how they grade things. They say second grade, third grade, and you have advanced students, right, who could go beyond all of that and jump straight to the fifth grade. The problem is because our mentality was so damaged, right, he gave us Islam first. And he said he gave us Islam because Islam is the dumbest of them all. You know what I mean? Meaning that Islam makes you accept anything. Islam teaches you to abuse women. You know what I'm saying? There's so many aspects of Islam. So what he had to do is he had to walk us through the school. We have to live, breathe, eat, sleep, pray Islam. You know what I'm saying? I know because in 1980 I was born to the Nubian Islamic Hebrew. My first language was Arabic. And we was learning Hebrew then also in Wu-nwaupu. You know what I'm saying? So as we start to grow, our level of questioning moved on, right? We moved on to the next stage. We started to ask questions that was related to the Bible. We started to realize there was a link there. You know what I'm saying? So it went from that to the school of Hebrew. You know what I'm saying? And from there to Christianity. You know what I'm saying? And so forth. And then all those religions took us to where it came from, which is Mesopotamia. Father Abraham. You know what I'm saying? And that's when you start to realize there's a link between the word Elohim, right, and the beings called the Anunnaki. There's no coincidence that there was a group of beings in Sumer, right, according to their story, their ancestors were called the Anunnaki, who came down and they grafted a group of beings called the Adamu. Adamu sounds a lot like what? Is that a coincidence? That's just one. And there's so many. Even the word Genesis, Barashith. You know what I'm saying? But the difference is, in those tablets, they had detailed explanation of creation. These beings genetically created this new being called Adam with a particular purpose. You know what I'm saying? As you go further on, you'll see that. So our master teacher had to walk us through those particular schools to bring us back to our mindset at the beginning. We had to go through all these negatives just to get back to the first place, the first part that he came through, which is 1967. This is why he said, I came giving you what you want so you will learn to want what I have to give. Thus, a lot of us here who have been students of the master teacher, we're on a level of comprehension and following where he's going. Now, I would say this, brother, don't underestimate our master teacher, because he is the man of the hour. You know what I'm saying? Meaning that he writes the books for the time that we're in. A lot of these younger people that's growing up, they're not religious. They're not into religion like that. They're very factual. Even in their so-called wrongdoing, they're very factual. They're like, okay, if I want to live like that, I got to make money. I got to do this. I got to do that. And they jump on it. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for the organ. I don't have time for all these things. You know what I'm saying? They may go with it the wrong way. But the fact is, if they have that yearning inside of them to know, it's going to be there. And that's when we make ourselves available to that. And a lot of the books that's being written now, you know what I'm saying? It's not made for that kind of it's not made for the mentality of trying to walk you through those schools again. It's given to you as it is. This is what it is. This is how the nature of the gods of the Bible really is. You know what I'm saying? You know, and then based upon how people are growing, of course, our master teacher is introducing more and more information. And that's how it is. But you'll find a lot of the younger generations are not into religion. They're more into actuality. They're more into science. And guess who's catching on to that? Those who proclaim themselves to be the authority. You know what I'm saying? Meaning that if you watch a lot of programs like the Science Channel, like the History Channel, they have all these programs like Ancient Aliens. Anybody heard of that? You know what I'm saying? Ancient Aliens, the whole series is nothing but the whole Right Knowledge series. Our books, literally, things I've been reading when I was a teenager, all of a sudden it's like this big, huge thing. You know what I'm saying? Things that our master teacher has been giving us for years that people will call him crazy for saying it. Now these anthropologists, paleontologists, astrobiologists, all these people are coming up today and introducing the same facts. You know what I'm saying? And theorizing and putting things together and showing you the science of the pyramid and this and that and the link between all the worlds and the world grids and back to the pyramids again. You know what I'm saying? And then, okay, they said something in the Bible too, but back to the pyramids again. What are they saying? You know, oh, what's the link between all these religions and the star system of Orion and Sirius? What's going on with that? And how different cultures, you know what I'm saying, knew about that, and how certain cultures even tied to different star systems. Could there be ancient astronauts and this, and they're all talking about it now. But this is something that our master teacher has always introduced to us for many years. Many years. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, to answer your questions, this is the day and time that people are starting to wake up. Some people are regressing traumatically, and some people are growing. You know what I'm saying? Some people want to know. I came across younger people who truly want to know. They're like, I've been looking for this right here. Nobody's really answering my questions. You know, what is this? Like, who introduced the science of the genetic kiss? The genes. Nobody has ever talked about that. About the science of why things are. The science of the different kind of natures that we have. You know what I'm saying? And different races of people and the natures they have. Nobody has really walked into the mysteries of ourselves besides our master teacher. They're trying real hard, but they're always pointing to a new form of God somewhere. Now the new God is some alien coming to save you. Again, bring you back to that religious mindset instead of knowing that you are the liberator of yourself. That those powers have always been available to you. You know what I'm saying? I hope that answers your question. Okay. Anybody else have a question next time?
Yeah.
And I just want to say this, if anybody feel confused about anything or need anything to be elaborated on, we are here to do that. This is not a sermon. This is not one of those things where we're lecturing and dictating to you what you should know. We want questions. Ask questions. We will go through the details with you and explain things and expound on things. That's our job. That's the only way the mind can really grow, if you ask questions, because you're on a quest for knowledge anyway. Go ahead, go brother.
All right, this is another online question. It's from a person named Bima999. He said he's kind of confused. Want to know, is Ta Enki or not? If
Okay.
not, what are the similarities?
Can I borrow this? Which one? Right here. Yes. First of all, let's establish for everyone here who Enki is and who Ptah is, or Ta. Enki in ancient Sumerian teachings, as our master teacher has taught us, is the son of the Most High, the god of Sumer called Anu, or On, or Ane, which means on high. And Anu had two sons, one named Enki, which means ruler of the earth, and Enlil, which is ruler of the sky or the atmosphere. And apparently those two brothers had a conflict with each other. Enki was also one of the scientists that was responsible for the grafting of the humanoids on this planet, or changing the genetics of the humanoids here to be in their image and after their likeness. In other words, when you go to the book of Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, Genesis chapter 1 verse 26 through 28, where it says, and the Elohim says, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. Now here's something about that particular quote which ties into the questions. When they said, and Elohim, when they said, and God said, right, you find the word Elohim that the brother wrote on the board before, which is a plural. Let us make man in our image and after our likeness. By saying let us, there is a request there. You know what I'm saying? And for you to even say us, you establish that there's a group of beings. When you said, hey Josh, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and Josh would say, go right ahead. Or he could say nay, right? So we established that. That's a question. Let us make man in our image means to look like us, right? And the word there was sawar in Hebrew, which means a picture or to resemble, and our likeness, to act like us, which establishes two things. There was already a man there, right? And that man was in another image and after another likeness. To say, let us make that man into our image and after our likeness. And how do you know that man was already there? When you go to Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23. And I haven't forgotten the question. I'm going to keep going there. But just so everybody can understand this point. When you go to Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23, right? It says, in this particular quote, I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Let's go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without what? Void. Without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the earth. Let me go on to Jeremiah. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Right? I beheld the mountain, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. 25. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. Verse 25 is very important. Do you know why verse 25 is very important? Because when it says, I beheld, and lo, there was no man. When you look up the word man in that particular quote, you see the word Adam. So this is talking about pre-creation of their particular Adam. You know what I'm saying? This is why this is important. Because when you look up the word in the Hebrew for man, you find the word ish and ishau for female. Don't believe me, check it out. Ish and ishau means male and female, right? But in this particular quote, it says, I beheld, and there was no Adam, which means that was removed from Genesis. You can literally take this whole part and put it here and it'll fit right in. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful places was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof was broken down at the presence of the Yahweh and by his fierce anger. Right? For thus has the Lord, Yahweh, said, the whole land shall be desolate, and yet will I not make a full end. Stop right there. Then when you read here, in the beginning God created heaven and the earth, and you go on and you'll see a reestablishment of recreation. And this is the thing you have to understand about creation. There's a difference between creation, right? You have the word remaking, reconstruction, and creation. The word for creation, right, is khalaqa, and the word for reconstruction is bara. When you read the story of creation in this Genesis, you'll find the word bara. But to stick to the point, right, those particular beings said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. And those beings were the scientists that were responsible for the necessary chromosome to breed this new being on this planet. That particular science was known as, or one of the scientists was known as Enki, who was creating a new kind of being. Now, to answer the brother's question, the being known as Pt.2 was the being responsible for the beings of Africa, or Tamare at that time. Two different beings. Now, Enki came to Pt.2 to learn the science of certain genetics or chromosomes. You know what I'm saying? So one was from Africa, who was Pt.2, and the other was dealing with those beings from Mesopotamia, and that was Enki. And those are the difference between the two beings, Pt.2 and Enki. All right? And if you have any other questions pertaining to that, feel free to ask online.
Somebody online, Brahma Miller from Guyana, asked, in the tablet it says that the beings from Procyon or the Nephilims, are they the same as the Pleiadians?
Are you asking are the beings from Procyon
Yeah,
the same as the
Procyon.
beings from the Procyon is the same as the beings from where?
Are they, he said, in the tablets, it says that the beings from Procyon, and the question he's asking, are they the Nephilims, and are they the same as the Pleiadians?
Okay, I would need more elaboration from the brother as far as that. Like exactly, first of all, where in the chapter of the Holy Tablet, and where does he conclude that? As far as his question, where is that coming from? As far as referencing that, because if I have more clarity on that, then I can expound. This is the reason why I say I need more expounding, because you have different beings from different star systems, right? Who may go and reside in another star system. It's like you being from Chicago, thank you, and you decide to reside in Africa, and you have, or let's say China, and you have children in China. Guess what? Those people are now nationalized Chinese. Meaning that's now their, you know, if you get what I'm saying. Better example, you have people from Europe who came to Africa, South Africa, right? They colonized South Africa, they fought the people, and they had children there. Now those children who are straight Caucasian, blonde hair, blue eyes, call themselves Africans. And they even give us a nice little nickname to it. They call themselves Afrikaans. So, go ahead.
No, it's funny you say that. When I went down to immigration a couple of years ago to be not a U.S. citizen, there were white people from Africa there who were termed as Africans and got all the privileges of being African, you know, black Africans, but they were white. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and that. Go ahead. You have some? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, that's fine. I'll probably let you elaborate on it if you want. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and let my brother go ahead and handle that question.
Okay, the question that you asked, let me just make sure it's clear. He's asking if the beings from Procyon are Pleiadians, is that what he's asking?
No, he said, in the tablet it says the beings from Procyon, right?
From where? Procyon. Procyon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Procyon, all right.
Are the Nephilims, and he's asking, are they the same as the Pleiadians?
Okay. First, he's coming from 9 times out of 10, and correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like you're coming from chapter 3 of the Holy Tablets, tablet 3. And you're asking if these beings, okay, let's go to verse 14. Chapter 3, tablet 3, verse 14 says, the disagreeable Anakite of Sin, or Sin, the sixth planet in Orion, also called Nirvana and Procyon, which means before the dog. The 8th brightest binary star in the Canis Minor constellation is also called the dog star. That dog being the Sirius star constellation known as the dog star, also Kalb, or as many know as Kaleb, Kulab, or Kulub, where the Hindu mixed their seed with Shaggy. Then they came down to the planet Tiamat from the constellation of Orion. First thing is, we're seeing that it's explaining in verse 14 that it says disagreeable Anakite. What we want to remember is that the Master is bringing us up to date with the updates. When we see verse 14 and it says the disagreeable Anakite, that's talking about Anakim, right? And then it says of sin, or S-I-N-G-H. Remember, he explained that's also another name for sin, or nanar sin, that man of sin, right? So they're coming from Nirvana, which is also known as Procyon, and these are Anakim. How do we know that, or how do we come to that? When we go down further in the tablets to verse 58, it says, and these avatars that came down were the 200 fallen Aluhum, and the Hindu people are descendants of them. So when we're talking about these beings that came down here from Procyon, that's coming from sin, and we're talking about nanar sin, right? These are the 200 fallen. These 200 fallen are the ones, when we're going through the updates, that are known as the Gigi, which came down, exactly. So what happened?
Is that chapter 3 you coming out?
That's chapter 3 of the tablets, correct? Chapter 3, tablet 3.
Number what?
We started first at verse, let's see what verse we started. We started first at verse 14,
Okay.
where it explains, well, go to 13 too, because it says a delegation was sent to the land of Nod amongst the Kuthites, the original Hindu people. And we know who lived in the land of Nod. That was Nanar's land. That was where he and his people were, according to actual fact number 22, 18 plus 18 plus 1, as a brother was explaining a little information already about Enki and Pt.2, right? So then we skip down to verse, here to verse 58. In verse 58 it says that these avatars that came down were the 200 fallen Aluhum, and the Hindu people are descendants of them. Now when we go in here to Sarabu Karabu, right, it says, let's go to Sarabu Karabu Patarak, and this is going to verse 72, all right? It says, in past times, beings from above were told, do not mix your DNA, your genes, with Homo erectus, Homo genus, Homo sapien. This is not a good thing. Well, some of the sons of these sky beings came to earth for vacation. There were 200 in all. They saw humanoids having janus, sex, in their fields, and majnanat, gardens, and became sexually attracted to the female humanoids.
Is that still on the tablets?
No, now we're in Patarak, Sarabu, Karabu, starting from verse 72. All right? It's verse 72. Page Kamu. Sarabu, Karabu. It's verse 72, page Kamu. All right. Yeah. All right. This 200 is 76. This 200 killed their men and raped the women. Then returned to Papatatat, the skies. But in time there was talk of the rape of the daughters of humans and the killing of their men. Yet as worse as that was, that these 200 daughters of humanoids became pregnant with child of these Karabim or Karabu cherubim, as you read in the Habaru or Hebrews records, Hatanakh or the Torah, in Genesis 5:4, in the days of the earthling Adam, after he had begotten Seth with 800 years, and he begot sons and daughters. Well, so, let's see. Skip down to verse 85, right? It says, they all 200 of them lied and denied, claiming that they did not have sex with the daughters of humanoids. When the Karadu children were born of these little women, the sons born of them were tall in height, and this made it clear that the 200 had lied, for these sons of the sons were now demigods, or Gabaru, Gibor, and like the Karabu, cherubim, was very disagreeable and wicked. Okay, so if the question was, are they Pleiadians? In this sense, based on what you're seeing from the tablets, And then seeing in verse 60 of the tablets where we were, it says that they arrived thousands of years ago in the land of Nod. And we see that the land of Nod was the land where Nanor was at, according to, you can go and look directly at page 65, in actual fact number 22, 18 plus 18 plus 1, where it says in the figures, it says that the Dravadu, or Dravidians, these Hindus, dark skinned with fur, wearing a red tilak on their foreheads on a daily basis, or special religious occasions, or ceremoniously worn by gurus, the son of Anan, Cain, but originally a mark of blood and Passover from their overlords, because as we can recall, the Master explained that Cain took that particular mark once his father sinned, where it says in the Bible, is it Genesis 4:2? Let me double check. Genesis 4:1, where it says, and that's Genesis 4 verse 1, it says, and Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I've gotten a man from the Lord. As Pt.2 has explained to us, what is happening here is, when she said that I've gotten a man from the Lord, that Lord himself was Nanor Sin. So Cain was actually his offspring, and from Cain came the Kananu. Let's go to Genesis 4:17, where it says, and Cain knew his wife, and his wife was also a daughter of Nanor, so that was his half sister. It says, and Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he built a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. So he explained that the sons of Enoch were Canaanites, and he said the ones that came from them were known as Guru, Gu meaning dark and Ru meaning light. And the mark that he actually received was what's called the spasti. In Sanskrit, it means well-being. And that's where you get the word swastika from, or swastika, because as the Master taught us before, the swastika wasn't necessarily an evil symbol like how these quote-unquote Caucasoids that call themselves Aryans, because the real Aryans was the Hindus before them, right? So that spasti means well-being. Well-being from what? He explained that that mark that they took on was the well-being of Cain himself going into the land of Nod, because all the beings that resided there in the land of Nod were flesh-eating beings who would eat other humanoid beings, but they had to know that he was half them. He was one of them. So in order to keep him from being eaten and to maintain his well-being, that's where that mark that they took on their forehead stood for, as a Passover for them. So if you're asking the question, are these beings that you're talking about here Pleiadians? In this sense, if you're talking about them being a part of this 200 fallen, no, you would have to say that these are these Anakim running with Nanor Sin. You follow? So hopefully that answers the question, and please, definitely, give us some more feedback if you have more to go along with it. So what?
All right, we have a question from another person online. Goes by the name of Sweet Daddy. Sweet Daddy says, how was the earth formed?
You said, how was earth formed?
Yes.
Okay. There's actually a whole chapter in the Holy Tablets called the Epic of Creation and Before that expounds in great detail on how exactly the earth was formed. You know, first understand that this formation of the planet that we live on today is not what it was originally. You know what I'm saying? There was a planet here before this particular planet that was much larger, 5 times as large. And when a great accident took place in the solar system, it reduced the size to what it is today. Thank you. Right, so in the Holy Tablets, it explains in great detail about as far as the formation of the planet, but also if you go to the actual facts, existence, how and why, starting with verse 71, it explains about how a planet grows. A planet grows until all the matter in its immediate area has been formed into an orb. Then the power of the sun ignites the planet and releases its attraction of the planet, and the weight of the planet, or in this case, like our planet, this satellite is 6 sextillion tons, moves the orb away from the sun. The suns are planets with brain and blood, and the other universe bodies are planets, which means it has a consciousness, which means smaller planets or plasma nets. Niyeth, chaos or war of the world. Net, which means that which is now known, which is now, I'm sorry. So this is how a planet is formed, basically. I was asking this particular, you good with that particular question? Okay, all right. Go ahead, brother.
To expound deeper into that, and I know Pops has taught us that, during that great accident, that the moon was cut out of the earth too as well. And I've been trying to explain myself and expound on that, and I'm trying to expound on that in terms of trying to teach others that the moon was a part of the earth, and explain how the moon has, I want to say, graduated into its texture and not have the same texture, the same surface and the same minerals that the earth has. And I wasn't able to explain that how the earth looks. It should be the same as what the earth should be. But can you explain that in detail?
Yeah. And this is like you said earlier, this kind of ties into the brother's question originally. First, understand that all the planets came out of the sun. This is basic science, basically. All the planets came out of the sun. It was spat out. There was an explosion. You know what I'm saying? And whatever's left got caught up in the gravitational well, which absorbs the matter around it to create an orb. Now, certain planets have more elements than other planets. For example, Mercury. Why is it called Mercury? Yeah, got plenty of Mercury. So you have some planets that are all ice. You know what I'm saying? Ice formations, and some have more abundance elements than others. Fortunately for this planet Earth, it has an abundance of many elements, 99 altogether. You know what I'm saying? And the moon, just to go to answer your question, when that took place, at one point in time was fertile. Just like Mars, at one point in time, it was fertile, and scientists are now beginning to come to that understanding. Something that our master teacher told us years ago, how the planet Mars was once inhabitable by life forms, you know what I'm saying? And there are beings that go there and set a base on Mars also. The moon also is a place where a base was established also. And when it's split, you know what I'm saying, depending on where it's at, it loses its life. Eventually, a lot of these things wither and die and go away. So what you have today is what's left over. It's just like, if you look at a body, a living body and a dead body. A dead body is different composition. I mean, everything about it is dead, you could tell. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have that glow, everything about it is dead. Some even turn gray.
Thank you to it. And that's the reason why it's dead. It doesn't have it doesn't rotate or anything like that. That's why I believe that there's other beings have set up shop on the other side, the dark side of the moon.
Okay.
And they have bases there or whatever. And I believe that the Amorites have gone up there too as well.
I got you. But one thing about the moon also is very key, very important. It doesn't have an atmosphere. You know what I'm saying? The atmosphere, or different spheres that it has to actually keep certain things here. If we was to lose our atmosphere totally, a lot of the moisture on the planet would, you know what I'm saying? There would be no life as you know it. You know what I'm saying? So, in hindsight, if you look at a body, look at a body. The moon is a body. The planet is a body. When it's alive and when it's dead. You know what I'm saying? How it dies, it depends on the situation. You know what I'm saying? So the reason why bases are established because they know it's not habitable. You can't just walk on the moon with just your nose and your skin and expect to survive because you're just not made to survive on the moon like that. you know. Now, they have the technology and the ability to re-spark life on certain planet, you know what I'm saying, or what they call terraforming. You know, if they introduce certain elements to the planet, just like this planet, at one point in time, and they have all the necessary elements to sustain the kind of life forms they have. Some things had to be transported here, like the water. The water from Earth came from Orion in the form of a meteorite. You know what I mean? They have a fancy word for it today. They call it, it's a Greek word, where certain planets, it'll come to me later, but basically some things that came here, certain bacteria came to this planet and came into the waters. The right conditions had to take place for life to be as it is. You know what I'm saying? Just like this planet, certain spheres protect this planet to keep things from leaving and keep things from coming in. Thus, you know, you have an ecosystem to sustain life, whereas the moon just doesn't have that. You know, under the moon, you know, they found there's water on the moon and there's water on Mars, but it's deep beneath, not in the state of H2O that we know, but it's in a more of a solid state, an ice state, you know, and not necessarily like the ice that we have today, you know, something a little more different. So it depends. You know, when you increase the knowledge on the heavenly bodies, you start to understand the nature of the universe. When you start to understand the nature of the universe, you start to realize the all is, I am. You know, there's a beauty about it, you know what I'm saying, about it all, how everything is intertwined. You know, just like your body, the way your body is and how it grows, it's the same way as how the universe works and grows. You know, how every cell in your body is harmonized and work and multiply together. I mean, it's an amazing thing when you really think about it. And when you take it to a larger level, the same thing exists in the universe also. You know, hope that was helpful. Right. I'll take this as the last question,
Okay.
then we're gonna wrap it up.
All right, so what is underneath the sea? What's underneath the sea?
Okay, let me ask you this. What do you think is underneath the sea?
I don't know. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
In ancient times and in this day and time, they know there's life under the sea. There's various forms of life, actually much larger life forms under the sea that withstand more pressure than up here. You know. Also, that's the thing, that question is so, it could go anywhere. Like, for example, if you ask me, are there extraterrestrials that live under the sea? I'll say yes. If you said, are there larger animals under the sea? Can humans survive under the sea? There's different things that could tie to that question. But under the sea, you have life forms, you have rocks, you have volcanoes, you have different things. So, I mean, you could keep asking if you like, it's cool.
I mean, I'm not sure which way to really take it. The question was kind of brought to me. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, somebody just asked a question like, hey, what's under the sea? Yeah, it's very broad, trust me. You know, for example, when certain extraterrestrial beings come from different worlds who live in a water planet, so they'll take residence under the sea. There are empires under the sea of beings of unimaginable intelligence. You know what I'm saying? Then there are life forms under the sea. You know, well, I'll give you this. Have you ever heard of the archaea? Archaea is a bacteria discovered in 2000, and it gave scientists a whole new understanding of life when they discovered this, because they start to realize that you have bacteria that can live, yeah, exactly, you know what I'm saying, without sunlight in a volcanic environment and just thrive, you know what I'm saying, deep under the ocean, under the sea, you know. So now they're like, okay, if that's the case, imagine something on a more intelligent level in far galaxies, you know what I'm saying? So under the sea is one of the great, like I said in Star Trek.
They call it inner space.
Yeah, inner space, one of the greatest, you know what I'm saying, mysteries on this planet. What most unexplored places on the planet is under the sea, you know. And one of the things our master teacher explained to us one time, he said, and this deals with dimensions and time, you know, he said he took the ocean or the sea, for example. He said you have beings that could live from the surface of the ocean to, like, let's say 5,000 feet, right? And they only live within that range. Mm-hmm. Then you have other beings that's from 5,000 feet all the way down to the very bottom of the ocean, you know what I mean? And they only stay there. And, you know, their whole body is calibrated for that, the pressure and everything, even being, having luminous ability, bioluminescence, you know what I'm saying, ability, all these. Then you have beings that live under the surface of the ocean, which I don't know nothing about, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, he was making an analogy with that with time and dimensions, how you have different states of existence here, and how, let's say if you rub the surface of one area, you may attract something from there up to where you're at, you know, and they'll haunt you forever, you know. But as far as the question with the sea, you know, go back to the brother, what do you mean by that, you know? Where you coming from that with that angle, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you saying they're mermaids? Are you saying, you know, are there giant squid people with 4 eyes? I mean, you know, whatever. Wherever the person might be coming from, you know? But if you have any other questions, you know, you need more clarity. All right? And with that answer, we'd like to thank everybody for coming out to question and answer classes. For those online viewers, feel free to continue with the questions and scrutinize, analyze everything we're saying. We look forward to that, and we thank everybody for coming out again, and hope to see you all next week with more questions. You know, Tawad, everybody's travel home safely and stay warm.